Right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Scourge of the Shires cast. And we're joined again by John Cinder, Hitman, but also we got two other guests tonight. We've got Nord Hugo, hello, and we've also got Elizabeth, who some older channel uh, members will probably remember of an interview we did probably about 3 years ago now. I remember it was during lockdown, the first lockdown at least. I'm just trying to think. I remember, Elizabeth, it was something you said about Rule Britannia or something like that.
Yeah, that's
Was
right.
it you around? Yeah, you got into hot water with your university.
Yeah, I got kicked out of the student union 3 years ago
That
nearly.
was that was it. You got kicked out the student union, and somebody in on Twitter said, "Oh, because it was like a couple of days after, or like a couple of days after the story was sort of going around, and I thought, oh, I'll ask this lady if she wants to come on and talk about it, and um, yeah, that was a kind of an interesting one because that was the first time I had death threats from militant socialists
What?
on Twitter.
Oh, oh, lovely.
No
Well,
way.
that's
Yeah.
I'm so angry because I thought I was bringing Elizabeth and AI Shire Tory together for the first time. I didn't realize you guys were mutuals. I was like, oh, I'm making this connection. I'm connecting these Brits. They're gonna show up. No, but you guys know each other already. All right. I can't take credit.
Well, at least
No, no,
you
I've
can say you connected AI and Cinder together, so there's that. And me and Cinder together as well, to an
yes.
extent.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, Nord, you pretty much brought John and Hitman and uh many others sort of into the connection space. So, but yeah, we've that was my first like big interaction online. And it was quite nice. I also got like a someone from the Free Speech Union messaged me and was like gave me sort of a word of encouragement when all this happened because I even had like it was a Liberal Democrat councillor called me a fascist as well.
For
I
like
mean because
for
Great.
associating with me, that's insane.
sorry, what was that, Elizabeth? I didn't hear
Wait,
that
why
bit.
did they call you a fascist? Was it because you did that interview?
Were you wearing a cape?
Oh yeah, well they call me a fascist I think because I was interviewing you and because in my sort of childish mood I went yes and then that was my only reply to him. So um so but yeah, I had all sorts of bizarre dysgenic freaks trying to DM me and everything. I mean it was fun. It was fun at the time. Yeah, even the death threats were quite funny to be honest. You know, like vegan, like they look like Holocaust survivors. Half of them giving me death. Like really, if you met me in the street, you wouldn't be able to do jack shit. So anyway, um, enough of that. Thank you everyone for coming along to this, and I guess we're going to be talking about the state of Europe, and I think just to get the feelers out there, do you guys think that we are heading for war? Because I think I think that's where everything is heading. It seems that there is uh, everything's on the move in that direction, and when you see militaries like the UK military, the various European militaries, even the German militaries, and NATO, the US taking everything a bit seriously. We've heard about putting the woke away, like all the silly woke stuff that's been going on in the military. Do you think this is a strong signal for for war, whether it's with Russia or Iran or whoever?
Well, personally, I don't think war with Russia will happen directly anyway, because I think Russia's too big and powerful. Normally, the GAE likes to go for smaller targets like Iraq or Libya. So I think Iran is a possibility, but not Russia.
No, I don't think Russia. I don't also buy into this whole idea that there's going to be a full-on invasion of what was it, the Baltic states and Poland. I mean, I don't. They just the Russians don't really have that capability, or given the current conflict they're in Ukraine, I don't think they've got the current capability to even attempt something like that. I do think though Iran, and it's quite interesting because this year we've had the lost Jonathan Bowden tapes being uncovered by various people, and in one of them, this was from I think 2006 or 7, and in that one he was predicting that the next target is Iran, and that they're being building up to that. And that was quite, that was back in 2006, 2007. So I do think there is something to that. I think there is I think Iran would be the most suitable one. I think with China and Taiwan, I think if China did decide to invade Taiwan, America wouldn't intervene. I just don't think they could.
I think they might. So, in general, I think that war is coming. Because if you look at a lot of the climate and societal accords that the G20 has and the G7 is moving towards, it can't happen fast enough for them. And the regular people are very resistant to this stuff. The realities of what this would mean of no longer having meat and no longer having certain types of produce makes them resistant to it. So I think war is coming, and I don't think Russia's going to start it. I think the U.S. and the G7 definitely will start it, because the United States is in a bad way. We've got an election coming up. We have a totally incompetent executive branch. We have a Senate and a House of Representatives that's teetering on ineffective. And maybe they've always been ineffective, but they need something to generally whip up the change that, I don't know how conspiratorial you want me to get. Excuse me, I just read the good points, but have you considered nothing ever happens? I'm totally in the nothing ever happens camp. It never happens until it does, and then it all happens at once.
I would completely disagree. I would argue that we're most likely going to see a war at home before we see a war with other international countries.
Define a war at home.
I suppose public unrest. For example, you can see this happening all over Europe, where the people themselves are being betrayed by their own government, and they're not having their interests represented. And the patterns of history have told when the people feel that they cannot make change through the ballot, then conflict does break out. You can see that case with the Guacci in the Roman Republic.
I absolutely agree with you, and would counter with why not both? Because what they're talking about is a total change in global governance. So why not every disaster at once? And the international war is a great way to launder money, and a disruption at home is a great way to impose totalitarian measures of extreme ownership.
You're right. Sorry, go ahead.
One point I want to come in.
Oh, go for it, Hitman.
Yeah, so one point I want to come in with is, yes, we can talk about there being unrest amongst the people, but we must remember, what does AA say in the populist delusion? All change is directed by elites or counter elites. So yes, the people may be upset, but only if there are elites sitting with the people will there be ever any chance. So like Elizabeth, you mentioned the Gracchi. The Gracchi were members of the Roman elite, which is why they were dangerous and they felt the need to kill them. And later on with Caesar was one of the elite. He was just a champion of the plebs, which is why the Senate considered him a dangerous threat. So unless there's actual elites, then I don't think any unrest will go anywhere.
I'm firmly on team nothing ever happens. So let's hear it, all my nothing ever happens boys in chat. Let's press 1 if nothing will ever happen. Press 2 if you think I'm wrong, because we're just in an age of lethargy. Our political class is so low energy. Like for so many of our politicians, a war whether it's the situation in Ukraine or whether it's the current situation in the Middle East, it comes down more to an issue of PR. They're like, oh, this is just inconvenient PR for us, and we just have to, keep things going long enough so it looks like we're fighting the good fight, keep our numbers up. But they're not thinking of it in human terms, the sort of grand ambitions that you get from certain figures that talk about, we want to totally shift the nature of world governance. We want to, bring about this new revolution in how people consume food and live in hyper urbanized settings. It's like, sure, they have a certain amount of influence, but they are not these sort of great warlord figures who are capable of rallying under one banner the sort of movement that it would take. I mean, yeah, we'll certainly see things shift that way to some extent, but they're also running into issues of practicality. German deindustrialization, that's creating huge problems with completing these plans because they don't have infinite resources to bring about these sort of idealistic reforms as they see them. So that's my hot take on it. Feel free to disagree though.
Well, how many of you guys think that the United States blew up Nord Stream? Press 1 in chat, and also I want to hear from the panel as well.
Oh, absolutely! It was the from what we've seen in the news, allegedly it was the British MI5 who probably did it on America's orders. Putin's accusation it was the Anglo-Saxons, as Putin said.
So does that qualify as nothing ever happens, or is that a happening?
Well, it goes back to that old saying, if I'm going to butcher the saying, if a tree falls in the woods and no one ever hears it, did it really happen? Oh, I don't know. That stupid old saying that you hear on the internet every now and then. But you get my point. There are things that happen in history where at the time nobody notices it. It's only like in the future when historians or anyone looks back on, you can actually pinpoint, say, actually that was a significant turning point in such and such events. I mean, one thing I would say is naturally I am a person who believes nothing ever happens, but one thing I would say is when if conflict does break out in the way that John sort of was saying, that there's actually not just Iran, there's a two different sides in a world war conflict, the regime in the West would be at its most weak, it was being incredibly weak. But because one of the problems they have with war is when you're at war, everything's up for grabs because all attention is on the war effort. It's not like other sort of elite projects where they can take a break from it, or go back to a boardroom and try and hash out any problems to set it back to their NGO underlings. That can't be done in the war setting. When war's happening, it's happening. And I think to the Bolsheviks in Russia, or even the Irish Brotherhood in Ireland during the First World War, and this goes back to what the other thing I was saying is, as Hitman said, people will be angry, they will be unhappy, and if there's an organized elite there, they might be able to pull something off which would threaten, which could be successful in that sense. So for example, there's something I want to talk about tonight before we get on to the letter, is that in 2002, I don't know if the panel might remember that there was a German coup attempt. Do you guys remember that? It was by
a German coup attempt. I can't say I've ever heard of this.
Yeah, it was by an organization called Patriotic Union. It was led by Crown Prince Heinrich Ruse, who was part of like the old aristocracy of House of House of Rouge, which is like a principality in old Eastern Prussia, and the goal was to remove the German federal government and establish a monarchy based on the German Empire.
Yeah, that was
pretty wild.
2022.
That's
I do
right.
remember this
Yeah,
at the time.
it's
Although I've heard other
Yeah,
people say that
and
it was less sensational than the way the media reported on it. That essentially it was just sort of boomers who were romantically idealizing going back to this monarchic structure, but didn't have, you know, the sort of concrete plans or the sort of concrete tactics in place that it would take to actually implement this.
so I would disagree on that analogy, because I think one of the problems was that the media at the time hushed up the story, or they conflated it with the January 6th people in America. So they basically made it sound like, well, because the trouble is, with January 6th, it's everyone, you all of us know, and the media know, that it wasn't an insurrection. It was basically a bunch of people walking into the Capitol, which the police allowed, and it's been conflated as an insurrection, right? Same thing we saw in Brazil, right? But this one, where they tried to conflate it with that, so in many ways they did lessen the importance of what actually happened. And it is important to remember that, with this, you had a crown prince, but he had judges, he had police officers, he had people in the army, and it was. I think that 25 people or around 50 were arrested in this conspiracy. But the point being, they didn't just have. He didn't have like that crazy MAGA grandma, or baked Alaska, or the shaman guy. They had some serious people with institutional power in Germany. So it was like a rival castle, even though it was a very small organized thing. But then again, at the time, the size of the organized group doesn't really matter. If you have 20, 50 people, exceptional people, then they can definitely achieve their goals, if they're with the right conditions and everything. And also, an important point to remember, that I remember reading before this. So I think it was before COVID, maybe about 2019. There was also an investigation into a possible other coup, which was more involving the military, but that didn't really, that was it was around missing ammunition and weapons from German military barracks. That sort of sparked the idea that there was a coup, that there was various far right networks working with elements of the military. I don't know about that. That story seemed to go cold at the time. There was a few people arrested, but none of them seemed to talk. So I don't know. But it does go to show that even in Germany, that I think that particular incident got them spooked. I mean, does anyone want to?
Yeah, 100%. And it's odd that they don't talk more about it. Like here in the United States of America, we don't hear the end of January 6th and the armed insurrection that almost threw away 200 years of sacred democracy. But you'd think that they would make hay while the sun shines with those stories, but they're very quiet. And so I think there's probably a reason, which is there are some highly connected people involved.
Well, I mean, not to put a blunt about it, but if you actually look at the aims and the goals of this coup, the confirmed coup in Germany, or one of the confirmed coups. I mean, look at the aims of the January 6 people. They believed that they could all march down, into Washington, into the what was it, the Senate building?
Yeah, it was the House of Representatives. It's
the
basically
Capitol.
the Capitol.
The House of
Yeah.
Representatives. the Capitol building. Yeah, they could march into the Capitol and they would stop the the certification process. Now, of course, that was never going to happen, and I know a few people who were on the ground at that time at that rally who had the sense when they were all marching off to basically get out the area, because they realized what was happening, that there were people on the ground encouraging them to march down there.
I would
and
interject quickly and just tell you, AI, that you think you know people that were there, but you don't. You are mistaken, sir. You don't know anybody who was there.
Yes, sorry, I do correct. I don't know anybody that was there.
Thank you.
Yes, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know anyone that was there. They were there in Ouija board spirits. You know, they weren't there really. You know, they were there in spirit. Anyway, so the I think why the they like to push that is because they know they know it wasn't an insurrection, but they like to use that because they knew it wasn't a real insurrection. They like to pretend it was, so they can justify hostile political actions against their rivals. So this is just Smithian 101 here. But I think the reason they don't want to talk about this is, in the German instance, their plan was to basically capture journalists, or like left-wing journalists and left-wing politicians, and take them outside to the out of the into the countryside and into the woods, and well, you get my drift. Like they were this wasn't like some sort of like silly boomer antics. This wasn't them this was like serious, we're taking power.
Interesting. Well, I'd certainly be interested in hearing more and learning more about kind of the details there. We can obviously save that. We can obviously save that for another time as well.
Yeah, maybe it might. I mean, I might do a dedicated special stream actually looking into that a bit more to see, because they have because there's been a court case. They've done the court case about it, and I mean I know that it was sort of determined that this was like direct Russian involvement, and there seems I don't know if there is. I think what it is it was organized by a lot of people of the old East German connection, because this was all organized like in the like with old East German sort of style people. But yeah, but I mean that's just one example. But I think, shall we get onto the letter by the British senior officers?
By all means.
Here you go, right.
So let me find it here. All right, here we go. So this is just going to be reading this out here. This is from this is from one of this was a Nigel Farage post from I think a few days ago now. So it starts with, "Dear Secretary of State, as retired senior officers of the Crown with experience of senior command, we feel compelled to write to you with a sense of sadness, incredulity, and anger, having viewed astonishing evidence of the depth of persuasiveness and racist, intolerant, diversity, equality, and inclusivity ideology being pushed within His Majesty's Armed Forces. We see these facts as they are, as a perpetration of monumental self-harming, and such a real present threat to national security that will give aid and comfort to the King's enemies. The sheer scale of what is reported is scarcely believable, and it cannot be I'm sorry, I've changed this word because I don't know what he says. It cannot be sort of quantified by or determined by just a few small adjustments. It requires root and branch removal, and we call upon you to order this in pursuit of your primary duties to provide for the sure defence of our island and citizens. Nothing could be better calculated to destroy the spirit de corps of our armed forces than this poisonous fargo of nonsense, or to deter from serving the crown precisely the type of people most motivated and apt to our high calling. Ours is a tolerant country, and this obsessive racializing of everything is both disgusting and reprehensible. As you spelled out in your Lancaster House speech correctly, in our view, we live in pre-war times, and Britain faces an ominous and darkening international scene with armed forces that are under-equipped, undermanned, and underfunded, as we were back in the 1930s. Among the lunacy of pushing woke ideas around, the use of gender neutral pronouns, or allowing male soldiers to wear makeup, or following locks on parade to accentuate their feminine side, we pick out the wickedness of a policy to dilute security vetting in order to boost representation of ethnic minorities, with Islamism and other extremism rampant. There is nothing short of dangerous madness. The cry for diversity has been utterly misunderstood. Within the military culture, what is to be sought above everything else is delivery of fighting power. In order to defeat the king's enemy together with the greatest uniformity of excellence and diversity of opinion, nothing else matters. The memorial gates on Constitutional Hill are an abject lesson of the unforced unity in all their diversity of imperial and Commonwealth armed forces in defense of freedom. To remove Christianity from the acts of remembrance is also a particular insult to our ancestors who fought and died to lead the world in ending slavery, and twice in the last century to save our island from conquest by extreme regimes. No one should need to be reminded that this is a welcoming, inclusive, and basically Christian country. Our civic culture on the 11th of November is sacred, Christian, tolerant, and inclusive on our terms. The Russians, Iranians, and Chinese will be observing our descent into self-hatred and obsessing over diversity inclusion with glee. These intolerant policies are forcing the British Armed Forces into moral disarmament, and it cannot stand. We call on you as Secretary of State of Defence immediately to cleanse our military culture of these poisonous ideas and to order a complete reset back to our core values of patriotism and unity that for generations made our armed forces the envy of the world. To preserve and deepen military culture, discipline, efficiency, the Ministry of Defence should be exempt from the public sector equality duty as specified in the Equality Act 2010. We are not civil servants, but fighting forces. Yours, Major General Julian Thompson, CB, OBE. And there's a list of there's quite a significant list if you want to go check it out, of other, lieutenant generals and former rear admiral and colonels and majors and brigadiers. So, yes.
Right. Well, off the back of that, AI, first thing I want to say is we should bear in mind that this letter was discussed on UO earlier in the week, and I believe all of the generals that signed that letter are actually retired, so they're not in active service.
Yeah, they're all retired. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I see this letter as incredibly cynical because, we're putting ourselves into this dangerous military position where we might be at war with Russia and Iran and China. Oh, we better put this woke away because we need white boys to die in our wars. Fantastic. I mean, you gentlemen are retired. Why the fuck did you not do anything to correct this when you still had the ability to affect things? Is what I want to ask. And furthermore, the cynical reasoning. So none of the army's there to defend our country. No, we want to get rid of all this shite because we want our soldiers to go off and be the world policemen again and bomb the third world into democracy. It just sickens me.
But there used to be a sense of pride that came of being a soldier in the British military, that you were protecting your country's customs, traditions, and values. But I think one thing that comes across quite well in the letter is, well, what are we fighting for? We're not fighting for Christianity, clearly, because the army is discouraging Christian elements in being implemented in remembrance. We're really just fighting for political correctness now in the army. And one of the key reasons most of those people have came out with this letter and are ex-soldiers is because if you show any right-wing opinions now in the army, you get kicked straight out. I know a lot of people who have been involved in the University Officer Corps, for example, and they've been kicked out for right-wing opinions. That I've never told anyone this on live stream, but in Aberdeen's Officer Corps, they said that you'll be kicked out of the military if you dare even follow Elizabeth Heverin on Twitter and Instagram. So this is the type of radicalness we're talking about in the military, is that its core values are no longer there anymore.
And that's a great
yes.
point, because the fundamental values that lead someone to want to die for a nation are exactly those values and those motivations which the current establishment in the UK and in the broader Western world is directly opposed to. So they have a kind of a fundamental opposition in the drives to recruit. I mean, what have been the attitudes that you've picked up or things you've heard from your peers as far as how they perceive the military, or if they have, any interest in signing up? I mean, I'm very curious what the feeling like is on the ground.
Well, my father,
there's
he
no
was
appetite.
my father was a soldier in Northern Ireland in the 1990s, and the army back then was very much patriotic, was very much right wing. So this change we've seen in the military in recent years has happened quite sudden, I would argue. And ever since the Iraq War, people have tended to have this distaste for the British military, that instead of fighting to protect one's country, it's just fighting to benefit the global elite. And I think this is where this change has come from.
I mean, I think, in the last 50, I've noticed in the last 15 years, the UK and maybe other European countries, but particularly the UK, has changed dramatically. I mean, the most notable thing is the demographics, but also the number of those people from what would be like foreign demographics in positions of power. And I'm not just talking about top positions, but like in like administrative power, like managerial positions, has also been dramatic, and that has affected the the way the nation functions. Because what you have is, and you see people on the center right, they'll say, well, the problem is it's dual loyalty, and it's not dual loyalty, because they don't have dual loyalty. They have loyalty elsewhere. There's no loyalty here. Then when you whittle it down with a lot of these people, which I have done. I mean, there's one notable quote unquote center right wing Moroccan girl who I see online frequently, and when you actually she'll part of her day job, she will sort of LARP as being a civic nationalist Brit, but when you actually when she's been confronted on it, she will say, oh no, I'm Moroccan actually. So the problem that you got is that we see, everybody, I think every person in the country has interacted with the new structures that have been, and the people running new structures, that the country isn't, I mean, it isn't worth fighting for, because the country is, it's not run by British people. Fundamentally, it's not right. It's not, I mean, there is no there is no what you would say sovereignty. There is no, then the British people aren't sovereign at all. And even on the foreign policy level, I mean, you have the collective will of NATO and America and everything else, and so that even then you're not sovereign. You can't make any decision. And also in that letter, I think one thing that was a massive and I've seen this before, is that the narrative being, oh well, we're so under equipped, we haven't seen it since the 1930s, but Britain in 1930s, yes, the army was under-equipped, but in 1930s Britain still had the largest navy in the world, the most powerful navy in the world. It had its empire, stretching across Africa, India. So we had presence in other regions of the world. But look at Britain today. We barely have a functioning navy. We have an incredibly small army. I mean, the situation isn't comparable at all. It's a lot worse.
Well, and I wonder what the British Army's view of itself is. I was thinking as you were speaking, I was in London in 2017, I think it was, and it was around the time where they're handing out poppies and taking donations. So there was a little brigade there in uniform, in camo, and I bought the poppy, and like the dipshit American I am, I said, "Thank you for your service." And they all looked at me with this weird like disdain. Not even disdain. It's just they were aghast and contemptuous. I just remember the expressions of the people as being very odd.
Well, it may be that because technically you're serving the crown, you're not serving Joe Bloggs, or in that case John Cinder or AI. They're not serving us, they're serving the crown technically. So maybe there was like maybe it just sounded a bit weird. I don't know. Or maybe because you're American.
Dipshit American, like I said.
I mean, I've been to the Tower of London when there have been American tours there, and if that's your first interaction with Americans, it's it's not the best interact. But anyway, that being said, yeah, I think there is that one thing that is quite interesting is that as time has progressed on, and I mean I was brought up in my parents, my father was in the military. I was born in effectively an overseas former colony come military base, so I was brought up in that culture, and the legacy of the imperial aspect of it, because it did exist up until it has existed up until fairly recently, and there's been a great deal of airbrushing, to remove that sort of connection. And so instead of fighting for whether it's the glory of the empire, the British race, however you want to describe it, it's you're fighting for either a democracy, equality, the new Britain that was built after 45 by the Windrush. That's sort of the new canon of the British identity, and it's I mean no one's going to fight for that. Nobody's going to fight for that, and I think that's what I think in the letter. I think that's the sort of thing that's coming across. I think they know deep down, but at the same time, a lot of those officers there were present when all these changes happened, and must have known about it. Or if they didn't know about it, that's just why didn't they know about it? But they only care about it because they'll want us to die in some shithole trench in eastern Ukraine or the beaches of Persia.
All I have to say is I'm going to echo Apostolic Majesty's desire that we just embrace some form of Anglo-Sakuoku, or where Japan in the 18th and 19th, early 19th centuries just had enforced isolationism, no foreigners allowed. We just stick to ourselves, and that's it basically.
But look at how that worked out for Japan when was it Perry sailed into Yokohama Harbor, blasting the big guns.
But the thing is, though, the Tokugawa shogunate, where that took place, was one of the most prosperous and stable regimes ever in human history. So I get your point, but I largely think it was very, very good for Japan, and
that's a topic for a different time that I'd love to talk about. But sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that would be a pretty good topic to talk about, the opening up of Japan and shogunate. I mean, I think also one of the problems, unlike Japan, and also another big thing, go back to demographics here, is unlike 1930s Britain, which was 99% British. Today the demographics are completely different, and if there was a war with Iran or any country, and there's been maybe you guys have seen videos going around of this, but the paper Brits, as I call them, the paper Brits, people who are British on paper format only, when asked, they're interviewed on the street or something, or would you join up? They're like, no, or suddenly now I'm West African or Jamaican or Indian or Pakistani or from Bangladesh. So
yeah, they're all British during the Olympic opening ceremony, but once they have to lift a finger for the empire, they're suddenly West Indian or Jamaican or Trinidad.
Well, it's like what happened. It's like what happened in Ukraine. As soon as war started in Ukraine, all the migrants left because they didn't want to.
I came here.
No, that's true. No, Hugo, have you got anything to add? So I don't know if I thought you might. Were you trying to join a second ago?
No, but I mean, it's a similar situation in the U.S. as well, because ultimately, what does a young man have to gain by fighting in the current U.S. military? It's very little outside of finance, financial benefits, and the financial benefits aren't so overwhelmingly positive that it's worth throwing away opportunities. So essentially, it comes down to this issue where the biggest motivating factors that can lead someone to fight in the current Western states are either financial or some sort of very abstracted, push for hyperliberalism, some sort of push for the sort of global spiritual project of bringing the world together, which you see with the some of the foreign recruits that have headed off to Ukraine. But it's the U.S., very similar to the U.K., it's a post-national state. Whether people agree with that assessment or not, there's not a core demographic or a core set of values that is held outside of just very particular parts of the country. So it's a very similar dynamic.
I would say that what's going on in the United States right now is very similar to what happened in South Africa, where like the Amerikaner class is now coming to be of like these heritage Americans that do hold on to the classic morals and dogmas of the old system, but now we're just beset on all sides by this weird postmodern, for lack of a better term, ideology of non-humanity.
Well, and what does it mean when you're in a place where let's say the Amerikaner, only a subset of the Amerikaner holds to the more traditional ideals of patriotism, and within the country, the Amerikaner himself is a minority? So, what is that? How do you assess a country on that level when it's a minority of a minority that actually cares enough to fight and die for their territory or their way of life as they see it, their people?
You got to open up the border and bring in undocumented Americans. You need a new stock from which to pull from to enforce the law.
But I mean, other people coming in, what is their, I suppose, finance? What is their incentive to fight for the current establishment? I mean, financial benefit, I suppose.
I think it's got to be finance, and I think at some point they'll offer him or offer them citizenship, full ride, full benefits.
Yeah, and it's also slightly odd because I mean, if you look at the conservative, like the mainstream of the, I mean, even MAGA, like conservative movement, MAGA, it's again, it's not full of what I would describe as legacy Americans or true Americans. It's I mean, even I mean, I know this isn't MAGA related, but like even like I mean, Nikki Haley. I mean, she's an Indian, and she's what? She's a senator from, was it South Carolina?
She's the governor of South
Or, or,
Carolina.
or governor even? Yeah. I mean, how does that happen? Like,
It
why,
just,
why is
I
it,
mean,
why is there an Indian in South? Why is there like? When I say Indian, I don't mean Native American here. I mean from India.
yeah, her
how
Nimrata.
yeah, how is there an Indian in South Carolina of all
It
places?
just-
Well,
Go ahead, Hitman.
yeah, one thing I will say about Nikki Haley is, or Nimrata, I should say, to use her correct name, is that her family are actually Sikh in origin, and I know there is a lot of tension between the Sikhs and Hindus in India, so that might be why, because a lot of Indians in Canada are Sikh as well, so that's possibly why.
Okay.
Yeah, and I generally get along really well with Sikhs, just in New York and things like that. They're pretty affable people, pretty educated, so it's easy. I don't want to say slip under the radar, but we're sold these bill of goods to be open and accepting. So Nikki Haley wanders in, and yeah, she's got a little sprinkling of curry, whatever. We don't care as long as you have the right values. But I think that's been used to slip an agenda under here that's bringing us to global war, to take it back to the original point.
Well, that's like that was the whole thing with Ben Shapiro, wasn't it? I don't care about the skin color. I don't care about browning America. It's about the values, and it's. I mean, I think that's sort of been proven in both our countries that that's just not the case at this point. It's really not the case at this point.
Yeah, you're finding that a set of values comes with the skin color, and there's no two ways about it.
Well, and what we're finding is, that there are two promises. There's the old promise that is, people band together and fight for patriotism for their people, etc. And the new promise is, okay, you fight for your values, you fight for your civic duty, your civic nationalism, your civic togetherness. But what we have now is neither. So you don't have your Singapore situation, or you don't have either. So there's, it's a financial system kind of held together by a hope and a dream of spreading essentially just the values of the global political and economic establishment out to the rest of the world. And for some people that is compelling, as we've seen. Some people are willing to fight and die for it, but it's a very small number of people.
Well, the only real conflict that has been invested in is a certain conflict in the Middle East, whether you're on one side or the other.
Yeah, but one of the interesting results of the browning of America and Britain, but particularly America, is that the new demographics that have come in, whether they be from Latin America or wherever, don't actually care about Israel or Zionism. They just don't care.
Very much the opposite, in fact.
Is it the opposite?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, because yes, as these Browns come in, they're pro-Palestine, not pro-Israel. So you're seeing the pendulum swing in the other direction.
Yeah. Sorry, I was meaning like on the sort of from my understanding, people on the sort of so I was in my frame of mind, I was talking about the people on who were quote unquote right wing, the sort of new demographic right wing. Don't really care, but as a whole, they're more in favor of the new demographic that's come in. They're more in favor of the Palestinian cause than anything else, and not Zionists.
But why should any American care about Israel and Palestine?
Well, it's a legacy of the old evangelical. It's the old evangelical.
100%. It's 100%. They're God's people. They're in the Bible. God said to love them and do not curse them or else. And so the evangelical world sticks to that. And
so we should, because it was in the Bible, that justifies sending like billions and billions of dollars to Israel.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not a theologian, and I don't have particular interest in that. But from my understanding, I remember from when I lived abroad, you had like Orthodox. I can't really repeat what an Orthodox priest. I can't actually repeat word verbatim what he said, but it was along the lines of they didn't see God on the cross. They saw a man God punished them and cast them out into the desert, and that they are accursed. You get the idea. I don't want to, because of YouTube. I can't go into I can't be to the specifics. But
Tune in next week, everyone, when we read the Babylonian Talmud.
I think America's weakness is its support for Israel. I think more people are willing to die for Israel than are actually willing to die for their country, America, which is concerning if you think about it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's
like, I'll tell you this: Americans, I bet most Americans can't even place Ukraine on the map. Never mind Israel. Yet they have this like blind support of this country because they're told to think it. They're told by these elite senators and people with a lot of money and a lot of power to unconditionally support Israel.
I mean, just explain to my two Americans on where. Okay, I understand it comes from like the evangelical church in the US, the boomers, the sort of infatuation with Zionists and Jews in Israel. But where does it actually cut? Like, is it like a product of like the Great Awakening in America? Or is it a product of just like a bohemian sort of lifestyle of Protestantism that was able to flourish there? I mean, where does it actually come from? Because the thing is, when I talk from my understanding from like Christians on the continent, especially in the Orthodox side, their perception of them is very radically different, and it's probably what I mean. It's what I would expect from a rival religion, I guess you could say that. So I can't quite understand where this comes. I just can't understand where it comes from.
Well, it largely comes from Billy Graham and a sect of Protestantism or evangelicalism called the Assemblies of God, which is spirit-filled and, like many evangelicals, very apocalyptic. And that's not to say anything wanting violence or wanting those things, but seeing the return of Christ as the goal, which more or less it is. And what they end up doing is they see historical Israel as present-day Israel, and they can't distinguish which one that is. And they see this current Jerusalem as the new Jerusalem, as foretold in Revelation. So they see that support as being consistent with supporting King David, right? These are the descendants of David, and they are, and I hate saying this, but they're absolutely ignorant of the reality of secular Judaism, or excuse me, secular Israel, secular Zionism, and the current state of Judaism. Because when Christ died on the cross, those Jews looked away and kept writing laws. So there's all sorts of new Judaism that's going on right now. It's not like it was when Moses was the patriarch. It's very different now. So the idea is new Israel is old Israel, and it will be even newer with our help.
So it's just a misguided conception by the likes of Billy Graham and the evangelicals of what the Holy Land is,
Yeah, no, I mean John summed it up really well. I grew up in an evangelical background, so I was very much inculcated with a lot of these ideas growing up. And yeah, it is a minority position among Christians on net, but it's particularly prominent within primarily the older generations around today from that evangelical background. So it was wildly popular for that particular cluster.
That's quite interesting, that.
I think another thing to consider as well is, especially amongst the boomers, is something that was kind of propagandized. Is obviously a lot of this comes from the legacy of the Second World War and the Holocaust, but also there's this idea that with the large Jewish presence in America, there was this deliberate sort of propaganda that was created by these Jewish sort of terror organizations that were operating in America and cooperating with American politicians. Was this idea that America and Israel are one and the same. They're these promised land of these hard arduous sort of colonists and settlers. And so when Americans see Israel, they see America, and it's like one struggle ultimately. And I think that's why there's such fanatic support there as well, essentially.
Yes. No, I think there's probably the good legacy of that, and it goes back to what I'm saying, that maybe the infatuation here might sort of die out with the boomers.
Well, it certainly will, and I'd point out again, as you guys probably know, that the Hasidim, like the ultra-Orthodox Jews in the United States, do not recognize Israel as being the legitimate country of Israel. It's a secular state brought about by a political party.
And furthermore, to add to your point, John, as well, Zionism is very much an Ashkenazi Jewish project. The other Jews, like the Sephardics and the Mizrahi Jews, were not for the creation of Israel. And in fact, because of the creation of the State of Israel, a lot of them had to leave other countries in the Near East against their will because of the backlash from Israel.
Yeah, 100%. So their idea, and this is a side thing that I'll abandon quickly, but they think their Messiah, the true Messiah, in their opinion, will form the State of Israel. So anyone less than the Messiah cannot form Israel.
Yeah, we see that in London. You see like Orthodox, like a certain branch of Orthodox Jews who usually team up with the pro-Palestinian lot in protests and stuff, purely on religious reasons. As you mentioned, the it's secular Israel, not true Israel in their view. But we'll move away from this topic because 77th Brigade is watching. As we all know, they're always watching. No, I think it's I think also, like, just briefly on the like the rest of the state of Europe as a whole. We in the West is we've got UK. The UK is now officially in a recession. We've got in Europe, you got these farmers' protests and everything. So it does seem that things are not. It does seem that the regime is sort of, in my mind, I think they're playing like a bit of game of like whack-a-mole. That they're trying to contain everything, juggle multiple plates, and keeping everything up in the air long enough to hope that they can save themselves. And I think all this sort of talk, I think there is a big part of the talk of this military stuff and conflict. I mean, I think there is a part of it that could be distraction techniques to get people's attention focusing elsewhere. But I guess we will see what happens with that.
Just to correct you there, the farmer protests aren't just happening in Europe; they're now coming to Wales, which is weird because I don't see a lot of people talking about this on Twitter. But Welsh Labour recently introduced a policy wanting to force farmers to plant trees on their land, otherwise they would take extra money away from them, and so on.
Oh, interesting.
Which is awful, because most of the land in Wales, 90% of it is used for farming, and most people they rely on the food produced by Welsh farmers, not just in Wales but on the Welsh borders and the Welsh marches. So it's quite serious. It's very serious indeed, and it relates back to the point I originally made at the start of the live stream, which is I honestly believe we're going to see war and conflict break out in our home countries, particularly in Europe, rather than in an international war with another country first. I'm already seeing those boiling signs. Now, I think the biggest evidence of that, which a lot of people have seemed to have forgotten, is Kirby. It's Kirby last year when the Scousers started blowing up police cars and protesting outside the migrant hotels. Although that is a daily occurrence in Liverpool, unfortunately. But it was still quite interesting to see. I'm also seeing those boiling signs in Ireland and in France as well, which a lot of people have forgotten. There's signs of conflict breaking out there.
Yeah, I mean, because one thing with the UK, like we don't hear these stories from Wales. You know what the Welsh Assembly under Labour is doing, because it's it's quite heavily regionalised to that, unless it's quite a major story. And I do have to wonder, because like we saw with lockdowns, you had like government, Boris Johnson and co, and whenever they tried to do something, you had like this situation like in Welsh Labour or the SNP in Scotland. They just would say no, we're not doing it, we're doing it this way. And so there is a part of me that if there was like a war footing, what would stop like councils or the Welsh Assembly or the Scottish Parliament just to say, well, we're not we're not joining in with this, we're abstaining or something. I mean, what? Because in theory, I think that could happen. It has happened before. I mean,
one thing to add is, remember when the Scottish Parliament tried to pass that trans bill, and obviously Sunak shut that down. So if they try, and the British government really wanted to, they could just shoot it down if they really chose to.
Yeah, if they really chose, yeah. I mean, that's gone through the courts. Yeah, I know they took the government to court on that, but to the Supreme Court over that.
I think why the situation in Wales is so worrisome is because, well, the Tories are going to lose the next election. It's inevitable. Labour will get in. We'll probably see similar policies implemented by Labour across the United Kingdom as is implemented by Welsh Labour right now. So we'll probably see more things like restrictions on farmers being implemented and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think Labour probably will win. And I think what you'll see is Starmer and co. They'll be on the surface level. All the surface level woke stuff will be go, and they'll signal boost towards that, and you'll have all these this sort of I wouldn't say anti. Well, yeah, it'd be like anti woke energy, but then underneath the skin, underneath the surface of it, it's going to be just as bad as it ever was before. But the problem is, a lot of people in our circles and stuff will lap it up. If that's my prediction anyway.
No, I agree with you. A lot of people are morons, unfortunately, and as soon as anything superficial happens, they just lap it up.
Yeah. And unfortunately, most people, I think, in a war setting, we've seen a lot of people. I think a lot of people from when the Ukraine war broke out, a lot of people who I knew online, became these ardent supporters of Zelensky. So, when the new thing comes along, it always whittles away a few, whittles away people. So, yeah. So, does anyone else want to add anything to the topic of the future of Britain? Sorry, not the future of Europe, even, and where we're heading.
Well, I'd certainly be interested in hearing a couple things. The first is, from the news I hear online about Britain, I get certainly the image of it as this sort of dystopian hellscape where it's this security, secular state that is, oppressive to its native citizenry. But what's the actual day-to-day experience in navigating this? Because anyone who grows up in a certain place and experiences the culture and political shifts has a certain level of knowledge and a certain ability to adapt. If you were to meet someone in the Soviet Union under the USSR and then they have a certain way of learning how to navigate and live within the confines of that system. Whereas if you drop me in there, I'm going to say something stupid and get arrested right away. So what is kind of the day-to-day experience like? Is it, is it more chaotic than it seems from the outside? Is it more calm than it seems, or is it and then in addition to that, I'm always interested in ideas people have for solutions and positive change that can be implemented.
I think the best way to describe Britain right now is Tolkien's chapter in The Lord of the Rings, The Scorching of the Shire.
Well, that is very bleak.
Yeah. I agree with you, Elizabeth. It very much does feel like that.
I would say, Nord, from where I live, it's not like, I mean, we don't have cameras. It's not like 1984 or anything like that sort of level, or Running Man or some 90s dystopian film that you can think of. But what they have done is, I live in quite a rural setting, and they've just many people from all over the world have been imported and dumped and hang around town centres, walk around country roads, and what you have is effectively a system of anarcho-tyranny. It's not so much, and the trouble is the police are useless. They're not like some competent KGB progressives locking up anyone for tweets and everything. They're actually quite incompetent. I mean, they can't even govern large parts of London or any major city. So, I in reality, it's what Elizabeth is saying is correct. The real sad factor of it is that England has been, the aesthetic of England is being ripped. It's been gutted.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been gutted in front of us.
Yeah, precisely. It's like there was a recent article that recently came out by The Telegraph, which was wildlife charities complaining that the English countryside's too British. And that really is the scorching of the Shire. It's these people want British customs, traditions, and its people completely scorched from the country and replaced by something which is completely foreign.
Didn't Sharky put all the hobbits to work in a factory?
Yeah.
Well, I can say, Matt, Nord, since the last time I was there, I was in South London, like the Walworth area, Walworth and East Street. Elephant and Castle was my stop, and I mean there are cameras a lot of places. And when I was working at the time, which was in like theater, I was pulled aside and warned about my use of language, and particularly not to use the word Muslim.
Oh, for God's sake.
That's wild.
And it wasn't like, just be careful. Don't use the word Muslim. Like they're very hip on the Asian thing, which for the US guys, like everybody's Asian who's brown.
That took me so long to figure out.
It's very confusing.
Listen to British people say Asian all the time, and I was so confused because in America, obviously that means like Asian.
It means East Asia. We're specifically referring to East Asians.
Yeah, like
Koreans.
When Brits say Asian, they mean like from the Middle East.
They mean the Silk Road, bruh. I mean,
Asians we mean mainly like Indian and Pakistani. That's what we're
to an American. That's the Middle East.
Oh, okay.
Well, in relation to your comment before,
it may be technically wrong, but it is American correct.
Okay.
In relation to your comment before, AI, on your opinion that Britain isn't too like 1984, I would disagree. I would, in the sense of course we don't live in a complete dystopia, but I've had my fair share of run-ins with the state. Do you know the organization Prevent? It was a program set up by the government to prevent terrorism, and it was originally aimed at Islamic extremism, but then because that was racist, they had to apply it to anything that was right-wing. Watching the movie Sulu was enough to label you as a as a far right extremist, according to Prevent. But when I was
God.
when I was 16, I was reported to Prevent for some edgy memes shared in one of my school groups. And they weren't that bad. They were just you know, they were of dark humor. They were kind of racist, but it wasn't anything radical. So I had to talk to Prevent for a couple of weeks because I wanted to take this trip to America. And they were always quite odd. One time they said to me, "I think you're just telling me what I want to hear because you want to go on this trip." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And they took out their phone and they showed a picture of which was my Facebook profile pic at the time, which was me in a Fallout 4 cosplay. And the quote was, "We won't go quietly. The Legion can count on that." And they tried to say that was far-right extremism. So I told them to look up what Fallout was, and apparently they weren't familiar with the video game, which is ironic.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
Government
wild.
agents, and you know they can't do a basic Google search for Fallout New Vegas quote. But the real concerning thing, and this still kind of shocks me to this day, and I've never really talked about it online. So when I went to America, I got off the plane from Manchester to Heathrow, and then all of a sudden I hear this announcement on the plane that says some police officers are waiting outside this entrance, and they were waiting for me, and they pulled me aside in front of my class, who already thought I was an extremist anyway, because I like dye-dubs and edgy humor and all of that. And they said, "We need to talk to you." So they took me into this like airport terminal room, and they started interrogating me. But they didn't ask me questions like you would think police officers would ask in these circumstances. They didn't ask me, "Do you have thoughts of violence?" or "Are you thinking about committing an act of terrorism?" It wasn't anything like that. They sat me down, they took my phone to search through it. And the first thing they asked me is, "What's your thoughts on Brexit?" And I say, "Well, I support Brexit." And they look at me with a very serious face, like I just said something horrendous. And then they asked why. And I said, "Well, liberty, I love liberty, freedom's great, you know, and all of this." And what they were trying to get me to say was, "I hate migrants, I hate immigrants, don't want them here, simple as." And that was my experience with them. And then they gave me my phone back, and I was allowed to go on my trip to America for a couple of days. But that's quite concerning, in the sense
Wow.
of you can literally be pulled up at an airport in Britain for being right wing if you're considered a threat to these people. And like I said, watching the movie Sulu and being patriotic in school can land you with being referred to Prevent by your teacher and so on.
Well,
That's
I'm really
crazy.
sorry to hear you had to deal with these mafia tactics.
Well, it was funny.
and
Just to end the story, I ended my discussion with these people, and I said, it sounds so cringe, like reflecting back on it. But I said to these people, I said, "Have you ever read George Orwell's 1984?" I said to them, and they said, "No, I've never heard of it." And I said, "You should read this book. I think you could learn a thing or two from this book." And then I left. But yeah.
It's
Wow.
100% intimidation. Like, I can't imagine what they're like at the police station. Like, "Oh, we got one. She's on the plane. Let's roll, boys. We got some questions."
It is interesting because I've it's interesting you say that, Elizabeth, because there's a few people out who I mean there's I think of Lauren Southern, and that there's the other one that was that similar thing happened when they tried to come to the UK, and sorry, I can't remember her name. She's sort of in that
Brittany Venti?
Was it Brittany? I know Lauren Southern can't come to the UK.
Yeah, there's another. It may be Brittany Venti. I can't recall the other one, but she's sort of like in that sort of sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And I do wonder, because I mean, let's be honest here, guys. Right-wing female figures garner more, you know, they garner more attention. I guess, like, I don't say attention, but they garner more following
Mm-hmm.
than others. If we just be honest here, and so I do wonder if there's like that was why you were particularly targeted. Then say, you know, someone like myself, Hitman, or other
Yeah.
content people out there.
And just to add to that real quickly, and this adds to your point actually, the last time I ever had contact with Prevent, and I blocked their number after this because I really didn't want to speak to them ever again, was after the Rule Britannia thing. So I was 19 when the Rule Britannia thing happened, and they last spoke to me when I was 17 or 6, I think 17, I think, or 18. And they called me up after a couple of weeks after the articles came out. And I was on edge from this phone call because I was planning to do a year abroad in America, which I did end up doing. But they told me on this phone call, they said, "Hi, we just wanted to talk to you because we saw the articles and we think that you're now in a position of being groomed by the far right." And they were basically saying, "We don't think you can think for yourself, and we think you're going to become a radical far right extremist." And I was thinking in my head, well, if I'm going to become a radical far right extremist, this is probably what's going to set it off. It's this phone call. And that was the last time I ever had contact with them.
Shit, we should be so lucky to be groomed by the far right.
Well, that's me. That's literally me. That's literally me because I interviewed you straight after.
But no, I guess I got groomed by Prevent to stay right wing. Because it's like things like that when you have experiences with the state like that, and you have phone calls of state agents telling you can't think for yourself or you're a danger because you believe in all these things. It's events like these lead people into becoming more radical because they've seen the reality of what the state actually is.
Like the state is more concerned about being.
Yeah, go ahead.
But the state is more concerned about you being groomed by the far right than you being groomed by like a tranny or like a paedophile or something.
Well, maybe Prevent, to protect their backs, will come out with a statement or something one day of saying, "Oh no, she's lying." But just to make it clear on live stream right now, I have letters to back this up. By the way,
I do remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, or anyone can correct me.
Yeah,
Didn't Prevent wasn't it found that Prevent worked with Hope Not Hate?
Yeah, they did. And another thing I want to point out about Prevent is the reason we have this propaganda of British values right now. You know, when we talked about that, British values are tolerance, diversity, and all of this nonsense. Is that came out of the Tory government in partnership with Prevent. Because let's be honest, the real British values are resilience and determination, and our history has shown that from the Anglo-Saxons to the Spanish Armada to World War II. And if children were taught about what real British values are, which is resilience and determination, they would rise up against this this state that only prioritizes themselves and doesn't care about its country.
No, it's the only reason I knew about the Hope Not Hate connection was that at the time I did your interview, or I think it was roughly in that same year, I had this is, and I don't know if you remember this, Elizabeth, I had like this Discord, I had my own Discord, and it's no longer active.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't go on it. I called it something like the Blacksmiths or something like that. It was just like a 5x1. And one thing that was weird that happened was I had these people. I mean, you had like the odd person joining, but there was one person who joined who used their real name, because usually people use like pseudonyms or something like that. And I searched the name, and it came back to some activist who worked for Hope Not Hate.
What?
And I realized that they were skulking around in my Discord. And what you do is, in Discord you can accept invitation, but then they can't access like certain channels for some time. And so they were sort of like sat in like this limbo bit. And I realized that, you know, Hope Not Hate was sort of skulking about. And I ended up kicking her, whoever that person was, and also two other people who appeared at the same day. And I sort of conversed with them, and I thought they were a bit, you know, there was something not right. You know, the sort of gut instinct was kicking in there. So and then I stopped using Discord, you know, maybe about a year after that. But yeah, that was
what date was that? What what time period was that when these people joined?
Just trying to think. I think it must have been. Hold on a sec. Let me have a look. I can have a quick look on the old Discord, because that'd be quite a good one actually to see. Sorry, talk amongst yourselves a sec.
Do you guys
I'm a
remember
bit-
Discord?
Oh man, so how do we get some good old fashioned American
remember-
freedom, Anglo-Saxon freedom?
I remember Matt's Discord back in 2020. Now that's real old school.
Did I have a Discord back then?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
how
I
I met
must
you. You
have.
had you remember when you were like a TikTok star?
Yeah. No, I remember that. I'd forgotten about the Discord. I remember we were friends on TikTok and then met up when you came to the States. That was a lot of fun.
But
Yeah,
I'd be interested to know,
TikTok days.
Elizabeth.
pardon?
So I'd be interested to know, Elizabeth. Do Hope Not Hate have you on like their like rogues gallery or something like
Probably,
Morgoth
probably.
and Sargon?
I've not been posted in their reports yet, but I've not been so active. So one day probably. I feel like it's kind of like you're infamous on the right when you get into like a Hope Not Hate report.
Yeah.
Like even GB News is in like a Hope Not Hate report, and they're like the most tamest of people. They really are a scummy organization. They really are.
Do you know what really annoys me is that Hope Not Hate, because I block their guys stooping around. I have not got a report. I'm absolutely gutted. Everyone gets a report but me.
But you have like less. No offense, but you have like less than 1K on YouTube and 1K on Twitter.
I know, but
think-
even like but even they're like some of my mutuals, people I know, like have been referenced.
What?
Yeah, but anyway, it doesn't matter. I had a look at the date. So it's like May 2021.
Well, it sounds like
that is strange because that's like that's only like a couple of months from that interview you did of me where.
Yeah, because I interviewed Sargon as well at the time, and I had
Wow.
I had who's the I forgot his name now, because he was on my channel a few times. His sidekick, his main sidekick.
Callum.
What do you mean?
Callum, yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think I
Callum.
remember those live streams. That was a good live stream.
Yeah, that was pretty good live stream. Again, that was when the snooping started.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
yeah,
because I remember that time I actually got a bit paranoid at that point, and I sort of didn't invite Callum back on again or anything. It's because he was setting up the Lotus Eaters at that point, and they were quite busy with all that work, and so they couldn't. We could do like the old Hearts of Iron 4, stuff in the evenings or something, but nothing. Not like streams on this format. So
it sounds like your island is being ruled by all these sort of radical left mafias going out and about just harassing people all the time. So what are like positive peaceful things that can be done or are being done to push back against that?
Well, people are waking up, and that's something I've realized in Britain. Like, for example, I used to volunteer at a museum in this small fishing town close to Aberdeen, and like an old gentleman just came up to me and started wanting about illegal immigration to me, and I think that kind of reflects how woken up the British public are. So the British public are openly against immigration. They are seeing what the state's doing in relation to freedom of speech. So I think the Overton windows is definitely shifted in Britain, which is a positive.
That's interesting because I think we should all care, even if you're not from the UK. You should care about what happens there because, Britain, if you were to take any single area and take the square mileage of it and say, okay, how many innovations, how many great works of art, how many amazing thinkers and writers and inventors. How much has come from this land, from this just small island, and there are very few places on Earth, maybe parts of Germany or parts of France or Italy that can compete.
Mhm.
What was that?
Oh, I was saying Italy.
Yeah, Italy as well. And these, if you take the impact that's had on the development of the world and the impact that's had on just the whole of humanity, it's extraordinary. So to keep these, to do what we can to get these places back into a healthy Christian state of being, it's like that's essential for the whole world, for everyone's well-being.
100%.
Sorry, real quickly, it can be done in the sense of, and I think this is why it's so important that people learn about Anglo-Saxon history, particularly children in Britain. It's that when Alfred the Great was around, the Anglo-Saxons were literally down to their last kingdom, which was the kingdom of Mercia. The Danes and the Vikings had conquered the rest of England, and it was through his resilience and determination that he was able to reclaim kingdoms back. So, for example, Mercia, and it was through his daughter and son that they would go on to restore the other kingdoms, and then it was his grandson Ethelstan who would set up England. So there's been times before in Britain where the English have been down to their lost cities, their lost forts, their lost kingdoms, yet have found victory and have restored the Shire from its scorching in that sense.
Very true. I don't want to mean that guy, but it was Wessex. But so just point out Wessex being the. I mean, yeah, that I think that's why Alfred the Great is one of the most important figures. Definitely a very important bit of history that can be drawn upon. I mean, to be honest, I think the situation in Britain, is getting worse. There's a part of me that thinks that I still filled with the idea that if the regime can pull a rabbit out of the hat blinder, they could probably get enough people back on side with the right sort of propaganda. But overall, I mean, I've sort of, Matt, I've sort of confided with myself to, what I do on this channel now is I find, with another American friend of mine, Connor, we find obscure, books from the era that contradicts, existing narratives, and I put it out there. We do readings. We find, I mean, for instance, we find political historical documents. There's a rule that I have that it has to be published before 1945, ideally before the 1930s, for obvious reason, because the framing after that was completely uprooted and changed in the culture and society. So that's what I'm doing, and so it's like a monk during the the sort of post-Western Roman Empire. I'm just sort of gathering knowledge, hoping that to preserve it for generations.
I call back to the stream we did on my channel out when we were talking about Be the Venerable.
Yes. Yeah, I'm literally him. I'm literally Be the Venerable.
He's literally me.
I'm gonna be.
Yeah, he's literally me.
I'm gonna be Geoffrey of Monmouth. That's gonna be me.
Yes, but I mean that's what I've sort of confided myself to, and in many ways I actually and then I have people like Alexander Adams who and Pharaoh and Villas who are producing distant art, which is and what they're doing is they form like a sort of elite group of artwork and makers where it's there isn't progressive or egalitarian nonsense wrapped up in for the people. So there are people out there who are doing stuff. It's on a very small scale, but the thing there is, I am there's nothing we can do at the moment, apart from stuff like that, and I think it's good You know, if you can get involved with, preserving knowledge, or delivering knowledge to people that's being suppressed. I mean, one of the books I'm covering on my channel is by Major Richard Hilton. Looks at the rise and fall of the British Empire, and it's a very. I mean, the book was published in my home county, and I can't find a copy in England at all. Reason I can't find a copy is because he, if you look at him, he was a member of the Empire League. He was affiliated with the British Union of Fascists and other organisations afterwards like that. But he was in the British military. He was in the Imperial military network, and he saw what happened in the. I mean, he died in the 70s, but he saw what happened in the 50s and the 60s. He was incredibly critical of governments in the UK, in America, in the West, Soviet Union, and and his interpretation of what happened in that period is what we're sort of getting to in this series, and it paints a completely different picture of how everything went down. And I think it's important to know that, because it's it's because you look at history and certain events, and you do think that there seems to be like pieces missing. I mean, for me, the one that's like the most obvious one is, which we all learn in school, is the Weimar Republic, and events happened after that. And you were always told that it was a wonderful liberal society, and people were freer than they were under Imperial Germany. It's like, well, okay, but why did events happen in the way it did? Why didn't it continue? Those sorts of minor things. Sorry, Hitman, go ahead.
Yeah, just to provide a bit of a counterpoint, I will say that my experience of learning about the Weimar Republic in school was a bit different than that. From my understanding, you were sort of told that, yes, it was a liberal democracy, but it was actually very dysfunctional. And what I was the education is that it's important to, I guess the subtext is, you need liberal democracies to be functioning, otherwise the fascists take over. So I still think it's important to why you were taught it. But I think what you're saying is, I think it's probably moved much more in that direction now. Any kind of, I think, nuance is just lost.
Yeah, I mean, when I was taught it, the thing that I got away from it was that everyone was freer and happier, but the problem was you had the legacy of the war, and that was constantly being brought up and propagandized to the public, and that's what made it, that sort of gave discontent, and along with like the French intervention in the Ruhr Valley and everything, and then the economic crisis. But one thing that one thing they will never touch on is, like with the Weimar Republic, is rampant degeneracy, transgenderism, some of the stuff that went on in the streets of, like, back streets of Berlin, the communist terrorism, just the whole, everything that went on there. Yeah.
I can't. That's a hard one to follow.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a bit of a sort of a.
How do I segue? Yeah. So really quick, I'll just say, addressing the art thing, it's a preservation of spirit and aspirationalism to some extent, which has to do with a romanticist idea of what identity is. So, all that bullshit aside, Nord Hooger and I are filmmakers. We have filmmaking aspirations. He's got a project in the works. We are part of that artistic movement to preserve what we can and try and create new as well. And that's one of the things we can do in the meantime. So it's not just the scribes and keepers of the sacred flame.
No, very true, and that's and it's kind of like it's the old saying, but if we all stick, and it is genuine that we all stick together in this, because that's how that's how we can sort of if we all stick together, then we're
we have to. It's we're stronger together than apart. I think somebody said that in Italy, didn't they? They're talking about
yeah.
spaghetti.
John, I didn't want to go down that. I just realised what I was saying, and I didn't. I tried to
Well,
avoid.
perhaps we should draw on a more English example. Funnily enough, yesterday I actually watched Kenneth Branagh's Henry V from the late 80s, and there's that
Love
speech
that.
he gives before Agincourt where he says, we band of brothers, we happy few, and it's such a rousing speech.
I love it. That's one of my favorite. I go to that and the Once More Into the Breach quite a bit. Those are my favorites.
Yeah, no, it is that spirit, and the thing though is, one thing you find, and this is something I'm cautious of, and especially my running with people like Hope Not Hate, and the people who will target us and persecute us and bear false witness against us. If you engage in like ADL Tommy Robinson levels of thuggery, and behavior, then of course you become, you that you will rouse their interest. And when we're online, we always like to do a bit of shit stirring and everything. I get it, it's fun, but if you engage in genuine like reading, knowledge, artwork, film work, writing, whatever, they won't really come after you. Those sorts of people, they won't come after you, largely because, and I'm going to segue onto our next topic, the decline of literature and literacy rate. This is how we're going to segue into that. And I think if one thing I found with, and I know with with Alexander Adams and his like art sort of function with Pharaoh and others in London last year, one thing that I realized is because it was specific, it wasn't overtly, like bulldog nationalistic right wing. It was actually from a sort of position of vitality and perennial traditionalism, all that sort of stuff. It didn't actually cross anyone's radars. It didn't cross their radars because they're effectively too stupid to identify it.
Well, I think to make good art, you just make good art. If you try to make something that's overtly political, it often doesn't come off very well.
Well, yes, and that was the. But I mean, you can make political art in another sense, but more for like instead of it being like progressive, you can make it in like the right wing sense. But yeah. So yeah. Sorry, Nor Hugo, do you want to say
Well,
something?
just on that point, the best art in my assessment comes out of approaching a subject in an exploratory way. So it's approaching a subject without your full understanding of it formed. So it's partly something you're setting out with a vision of, but it's also something where you're learning along the way and you're experiencing something for the first time. It's partly ordered, partly chaotic in that way. And I think it's that level of honesty and that level of curiosity that separates a good piece of media, a good artistic piece of media, from something that's merely, cheap or heavy-handed attempt at just pushing a particular set of views. But what do you guys make of that?
No, I agree with that.
Sorry, I kind of derailed the flow there.
No, it's okay. No, I do
You
agree with that.
derailed the Windrush, bro. What are you doing?
I was going to say, 'cause, I mean, the topic we're coming on to next is our second point. Is like I called it literature and the literacy rate, like decline in literacy rate, and I guess it does sort of play into just the general overall just decline in standards and everything else. But
I was gonna say like that's not unique to Europe. I mean that's international, and you guys are importing quite a bit of illiteracy as well. And everything's moving to TikTok. As our TikTok friends here said.
Yeah, I mean it's like shorthand, I think emojis is the worst thing to happen. I do think that emojis should be banned or taxed or something. I don't know.
A
It,
VAT, a VAT.
It might, it
VAT
might, it might be reflecting a bigger problem. It's like what Jolly Heretic talks about. We're living in an IQ crisis. Maybe
yeah,
that's why literacy rates are going down, and the internet and TikTok adds to that as well. Of course.
I mean the thing that was like when I'm reading, I was reading actually Bishop Asa, the person who accompanied Alpha the Great we were sort of referencing, and in his tale of life, you have like Asa, he would come across like your average peasant, and they would have your better comprehension skill than the average university educated British person today, or even foreign student today. And it does seem, I mean, it seems like, as you say, a combination of like a complete fall in IQ, but also in in just communication. And it's something we talked about in the last stream, but the rise of TikTok, the rise of, I mean, the sort of state allowing or lowering of standards has created a situation. And I do wonder, we talk about um, the lack of, more men and women abstaining from relationships, sex, whatever. I do wonder if this is like a greater thing, not than just literacy and literature, but a collapse of communication, and just people just becoming like literal zombies.
Bet.
It reminds me that
Bet.
there's that quote that goes around on Twitter a lot, which is something to the effect of, we went from teaching Latin in high school to teaching remedial English in college.
That's bleak.
I think it also could be just part of the wider competency crisis, as people like to keep mentioning.
It tells me we need to be sophistication maxing. We need to be sipping tea. We need to have the fireplace.
You're
we need
talking
to
to
be
Brits,
dressed to the
man.
nines.
They're
That's
already
what-
sipping tea. You and me, we got to put down the Coca-Cola, bro.
Oh man, don't hit me like that. Don't be so honest. I like
Well, if you
to.
want-
We fancy ourselves sophisticated. That's what matters.
I think there's.
Go ahead, Hitman.
I was going to say, I think in general, I think there's been a general decline in sophistication amongst all people, regardless of nationality. Unfortunately, it's just this. I don't know. It's like all this egalitarianism and the reducing of everything to the lowest common denominator.
Well, and there's a certain level of sophistication that will alienate you from people, and that's a lonely place. And so, while I agree in general, sophistication maxing for the good of the race or the culture, but ultimately that's going to lead to a very lonely life with very few people that you have common ground with.
Well, no, but the thing is, in the past, if you were part of certain circles, you would just associate with people in those circles. I mean, we're talking about literacy. Well, one example, I remember a couple of years ago, it was Mr. D. He had an appearance on Millennial, and he and Woes were talking about sort of education reforms, about how, back when it was all, the lower classes would only get basic, the reading, writing, arithmetic, the poorer kids, they wouldn't learn something like Shakespeare. And then in modern education, all suddenly, everybody's learning Shakespeare. But what happens, you don't raise these lower people, the lower orders up to appreciate Shakespeare. They don't appreciate it. And I can attest, as someone who went to a state school, most kids did not really care about Shakespeare. And what this ends up leading to is you get people who say, we shouldn't teach Shakespeare in education. And then that's it. Boom. No one gets to learn about Shakespeare anymore, and we're all, and anybody who would appreciate it is worse off.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I get it.
Well, I'm afraid I have to hop off a bit early, but this has been a lot of fun. So I just want to thank you, gentlemen, and yeah, hope to listen into the rest of the discussion as it keeps going.
Well, nice chatting to you again, Nordhuger.
Bye, dude.
Bye-bye. Oh, he's gone.
Well, it's a competency crisis. It's a degradation of society.
But it's not
Uh,
just Shakespeare. It's like all of the stories and the great books our ancestors, our grandparents even, and our parents even grew up with and not even taught about. It's like, for example, how many people are actually told the stories of King Arthur and the legends of Brutus, for example. Is and the tales of Robin Hood even. We're losing our national stories in that way as well. It's not just Shakespeare.
Well, no, because the whole point of education is you just to be some, slave work unit that just grinds along in this mechanical hell we all live in.
Exactly, and I think the reason literature is falling apart particularly is because there's this prioritization of STEM, and then people see STEM as more important than humanities. And the problem with that is that people don't get taught about English and history anymore, and philosophy even. People, growing up in school and going to sixth form, people held this opinion that philosophy was stupid, and it was like one of those stupid classes you took. It wasn't really important. There was no meaning that could come out of it, and that's people's impressions nowadays when it comes to the humanities.
I agree with you to an extent, but I do, unfortunately, STEM, I think, has much more practical uses, and I don't think it's something that should be neglected. But I do sympathise with what you're saying about philosophy.
I mean, it's useful, but I don't think it's more important than philosophy and literature. I think it's probably equal in importance.
I think another issue is obviously you've got the woke ideology subverting everything and just writing awful stories. Like a good example is, I don't know if you people are aware, but there's this book that was released called The Song of Achilles, and it's basically this like gay rewrite of like the Iliad, like basically turns Patroclus and Achilles into like a gay couple.
I know all about that, and it's very stunning and brave, obviously.
Daring, in fact.
But we have to ask ourselves, why did the humanities become so left-wing?
Because it was infiltrated by cultural Marxists and the Frankfurt School.
Yep, that's exactly it. I agree 100% with that. They came into town with a suitcase and an agenda, and they seem to have accomplished it.
Well, the only thing I will say is that it's not all doom and gloom, because I mentioned on the last stream that you've got because not all of our dissident publishers are just engaged in releasing non-fiction. You've got people like Dave Martell's Archives that release a lot of pulp literature, which is looks quite good from what I've seen of it. And also he does publish a lot of old classics as well, stuff from like 100 years ago.
Also, what is happening to AI?
I think you might be having connection problems.
Oh no.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Yeah, my mic has just been. I don't know what's happened. My mic's not working, or it's not responding. So I've just had to go onto another computer.
Hope Not Hate has hacked your microphone.
Yeah, they've. I get the 77th Brigade lurking around now. You know what? I do hope. One thing I do hope is that if the 77th Brigade, which is like a British military intelligence body that monitors us, I do hope my case officer enjoys these streams. Maybe they become like radicalized by watching my streams or something. I don't know.
I guess I should take it as a compliment if they turn up on my streams eventually as well.
Yeah, I mean maybe they'd learn more on all our streams than like going to university or something. So especially if they want to do like history or something. I don't know. But yeah, I mean I've
I do think, number one, most people, one of the problems that you have today is because I think most people can't manage. Most people can't manage education and learning and academia, and when you put them in that position, they end up coming away with half-baked ideas, or and it requires that. I think you have. I mean, what we used to have in this country is we used to have. We used to have a system of schooling where you'd have like your grammar schools, which was for people in the more academic side, and you'd have your effectively your state schools, which was for the everybody else, and those were done away with. But I do think that you have like this. There's this idea that if you're an expert or you're high ranking in one field, and then you have a knowledge, then you're sort of knowledge. You have like this knowledge idea that you have absolute knowledge in all other fields, and then you have like this. I mean, we see it. We talk about the historians like Tom Holland and that Dan Snow fellow. That they will be used as a source of authority in politics and international policy and everything, even if they're barely a good historian. And also historians like that, because they have to deal with the masses, they have to dumb down their work, they have to dumb down their research, and in doing so, they dumb down themselves, and then they come out with absolutely ridiculous statements, and they come across as just barely knowledgeable plebs themselves.
Or Tom Holland reducing himself to like point scoring against like the Putin interview, or like counter signaling Caesar in that stupid documentary he put together.
Yeah, I mean, and also back in the George Floyd days, I mean, his argument was with the statue in Bristol, the Colston statue. Oh well, we've always had iconoclasm in around Europe, in Christendom and everything, and it's like, well, the iconoclasm was from a deeply religious, higher thinking perspective. It wasn't because of some junky black Minnesotan Minneapolis who OD'd.
Yeah, but AI, the thing where those radicals are coming from is almost a quasi-religious position if you think about it.
I was going to say that we say "peace be upon him" after we say his name here in the United States. So just
piss all over him. But anyway,
that's close.
Yeah. Anyway, but I mean, at the same time, I also don't agree with the idea. I mean, I know the idea is woke and that sort of stuff is a religion, but to be a religion, you have to be willing to die for it, and a lot of it was just ritualistic, performative stuff. Especially with George Floyd, it was ritualistic. I don't believe if you were to arrest them and threaten them with literally being chucked in with lions, that they would be true devotees then to the cause, because I don't think they would be. I mean, maybe you have like the odd one or two, but on the whole, because again, as we saw, they moved on to the next thing, which was like, what was it? It was what was it? Election, January 6th. So it would have been the Ukraine stuff, COVID and Ukraine. Yeah. So
well, there was they used Russia collusion, Trump and colluding with Putin to get the and all his court cases as kind of the grease between the wheels of all of those events.
So you're telling me, AI, that we're not going to be seeing a Shaniqua's Book of Martyrs anytime soon, then?
Well, no, because they're not consistent, because I mean, the thing there is, and this goes back to TikTok generation, is that all these people have such short attention spans that they can't create jack. There's nothing they can create because it has no longevity, And I mean, even if they were committed, which I don't believe they were, I mean, there were the only people who were committed were the Black Lives Matter, people that was taking money from dipshit white liberals, and so I mean, yeah, that's the only commitment that I saw from that came out of that particular movement. I didn't see anything else.
So BLM were pretty much sort of packed away once Biden became the president.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, largely it did, because the only reason BLM was there was to destabilize Trump. And I mean, I call me conspiratorial here, but I actually think BLM, COVID, and everything that went on in 2020 was a way of not just, it wasn't about Trump so much, it was about suffocating the populace energy in some way. It was to suffocate it because they were worried that it could become something greater, left unchecked. And that goes back to what we said in the first bit, was like with the German dude, the German prince who tried to that coup, is that one thing they're ultimately afraid of is losing their power. To quote Palpatine.
And that was a great way, that whole instance of the unrest and the COVID, to consolidate power, because all the damage that was committed in all the cities, all that property was sold and bought up by our friends that had the money, and all the businesses that closed were small businesses. It wasn't the big box stores. It wasn't the It was all the small people that went out of business. So 40% of private restaurants in the United States closed during COVID.
No, and the funny thing is, I was watching a documentary about the LA riots. What was it, in '92, with the whole Rodney King beating, or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And similar thing, you had local Democrats, a Democrat senator, that black one, I can't remember her name now. She was involved with a large deal of inciting, but in this one, she incited a lot of the riots to continue, a lot of the destruction, and as soon as the dust had settled, property and everything changed hands. There was a lot of different purchasing. So this tactic has been used for a while, and they whip up the people in their cities, their fiefdoms, to riot. And I mean, I think the only place that I would say that it did spiral out of control for them was probably Portland. Because that continued well into the following year, didn't it? Daily.
It did, and that became, I think that was entirely under the purview of the mayor at the time, who was a pretty rabid leftist, and he didn't quite know how to deal with that situation, but he had to go in after those two kids were murdered.
Yeah.
I also remember Chaz in Seattle as well. That anarchist commune that was set up.
Oh yeah, that was again, going back to my early streams. I remember there was I did I think with Cringe Walker, we were sort of laughing and joking at watching videos of them attempting to do farming, and there was one great image of this skinny sort of Antifa, dressed up Antifa type, kneeling and looking at the sky. It's trying. It looked like he's saying, "Why, God? Why isn't it growing?" Sort of thing.
More accurate would be, why Lenin is it not growing?
Oh yeah, why let me more Lenin? Yeah.
And also, how could we?
Good.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
I was gonna make a joke, but it's been 8 hours. Why hasn't anything grown?
Yeah. Yeah.
Impatient communists, and also, how can we not mention the 1992 riots and not mention the Ruth Koreans?
Oh yeah. again, there was. I actually want. I don't know if there's any deeper, like dissident work into the '92. I think I'm just trying to think. Did any uh,
Actually,
like
another point that's come to my mind, because '92 was an election year, so I wonder if that was anything to do with it as well.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I'm towards it, Thomas 77, people like that, because at the time California was quite a Republican state, but not just in presidential, but also in like state politics, and yet this particular time you saw that slow transition to it to become quite Democrat, and
Yes, because I think that was actually the year that Dianne Feinstein became senator for California, '92.
yeah, and there's a lot of points by people on the right who basically look at California and say that there was, '92 was sort of the catalyst, and that there was a lot that it led to a lot of the old, again, the Republican white stock of that state were usurped by the coalition of the civil rights people, let's say.
Because also, if I remember correctly, the '88 presidential election was the last time California went red. Every election since then, it went blue.
Yeah, and Reagan was from California, so that was...
Yeah. But also you get like these like super, like in state and like midterms elections and on the congressional seats or senate, you get like these super majorities as well. Like these like I mean, not just in California but other blue states, you get like these Mugabe levels majorities.
And also because
sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, I mean, also I remember in the last election, California, how many like weeks or months did it take to finish, to finalize the result in the presidential election? Because I remember it took forever. Because I was covering it at the time because of the whole shenanigans around the election. I remember looking at California. There was like people, like someone was arrested with ballot boxes in his car. Like there was all sorts of things going on.
I think it took a good several days, but it wasn't as bad as places like Michigan or Nevada, those places that were like took like a month to count the votes.
It's just insane, and it's never happened before, and yet most secure election of all time in the United States.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know what you think, John, but I think Trump will win this year.
If they let him run, I mean, if you really, I honestly have heard all sorts of things, and I think they have to start a global war. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but we're facing so many strange things that they cannot abide another Trump presidency. They just cannot let it happen.
They're gearing up for it, and the take I've heard is that in terms of a war, if there's going to be a war, they'll do it this year because they know if they leave it too late and Trump is president, they won't really get a major war with him in charge.
Yeah, and I completely believe that he will find middle ground in Ukraine, and he will negotiate a peace, and the money will be cut off. And I still believe 100% that like 25% of those cash pallets are going to Ukraine, and the rest are going to politicians and businesses who then funnel it back to the politicians in the United States and globally. It's just a money laundering operation because there's no way to track that money once it hits the ground in Ukraine. So they're looting the United States. Trump would put a stop to that. They can't abide that.
I mean, I do think that it could be that Trump could be the blue Caesar, the savior of the regime.
I would like nothing more than that. But again, nothing ever happens, so we're not going to get our Caesar. In fact, I heard yesterday someone say they're going to run Biden and he's going to win.
No. So what I mean is Trump will be the regime's guy. You know, he'll bring MAGA and the white boys back on side.
Trump will save the regime, not kill it.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, not
okay,
that.
okay. I'm with. I mean, I could see that as a possibility.
There is another idea, which I don't know if you guys, but Morgoth had an article about a couple of weeks ago, and he had this idea that Trump could be a bit like an American Gorbachev. His attempt to try and reform the system could actually really fuck things up and cause the whole thing to crash and burn, which is why the elites are so shit scared about him being president again.
Yes, that there is that. It's really hard to tell. I mean, I know that there was the head of the CEO of JP Morgan Chase has sort of signaled some favourable words towards Trump and MAGA. I think that's quite an important move. But I mean, overall, there's also the thing that I've seen going around is that there are some Americans who believe the election actually won't take place this year. That there won't be an election this year.
Yeah, I was in an argument about this today. They will have an election. It might not be a real election, but they will have it. They just cannot. They've been going on so hard about our democracy for the past 3 years, that they have to legitimize it or have the perception of legitimacy.
No, because remember, when it was World War II, they still had that election in 1944 where they re-elected FDR for the 4th time, so...
Yeah. It was I think it was the 3rd time, but who's counting at that point, right? It could have been the 9th time.
It was the 4th time, yeah. Oh. But to be honest, they could have just suspended that election, and he would have stayed as the president, and it would have just gone along with it, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, funny enough, I can actually see them pulling a no election move if they would. Now, on the basis of Trump being a threat to democracy.
Well, then the play there, and let's put ourselves in the elite shoes, is to throw out 50% of the ballots, like I presume they did in 2020.
And one other thing as well, I just remembered, is they had an election in 1864 when the Civil War was still raging, so it would be really unprecedented if they did not have one as well, if you think of it in that way.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not shooting down no election. I'm shooting down suspension of election, because again, they need that veneer of legitimacy. I mean, if it's a real disaster, if Russia ends up using its space nukes on us, then they might suspend it. But anything short of that, I think they'll have it.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe they fake the alien invasion with that's been rumored.
That's a topic for a different show.
Yeah. Project Bluebeam discussions. Yeah, I mean, actually, on the topic of the nukes in space, what's happened there, John? What's that about? I saw that going around today.
Well, a couple days ago, the Speaker of the House refused to bring the Senate bill, that $95 billion in foreign aid. They refused, and not a dime for the American people. They refused to bring it to the floor, so it couldn't go through the process. 60 million of it was for Ukraine, and 2 days later we were warned, national alert, national security alert, the Russians are putting nuclear missiles in space. So that made the rounds, and luckily in the circles that I run in, which are getting larger every day, nobody bought it. Everybody immediately oh no, it's the Death Star. Darth Vader invades the United States. It's just this stupid psyop to rush that funding through, because there's obviously the people of the United States are seeing their money go a lot of places, and we're watching eggs go up by 30%. Hamburger or beef is up 30%. Other stuff is up more, and their dollar's not going as far. and people are really struggling. Rent is increasing, but wages are not. It's the age-old problem, and they continue to send this money to Ukraine, and they've let 8 million people over in the past 3 years who are at various stages of getting public funding to live their life. There are people in Maine who are getting 2 years of free rent to live in an apartment. And the majority of the Americans are really struggling to keep up with rent. I know you probably see all these TikToks of these people complaining about it. But long story short, Russia is putting satellites that can interrupt American satellites, destroy American satellites, and paving the way for a nuclear payload delivery system via satellite.
But that's been happening 10 years? It's not. I mean, China's been doing it for as long as that.
Right.
Russia's been doing. That's not new.
Well, it's again, to your point earlier in the stream, people have short memories.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. I mean, actually, your nation was really the first to do it with Reagan Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's like a like a Russian version of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And when I mean Star Wars, I don't mean the film Star Wars. I mean the actual
the defense, the Defense Department program,
that people can look into if they want to in their own time, in chat if they're unaware with it. But it's I mean, because of course like all international agreements, they're there to be broken repeatedly. The idea to demilitarize space, and of course that's for the birds. That's just delusional. Space can't be demilitarized.
Is the Star Wars and defense program the reason why the horse is with Ukraine AI?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I do think, looking into it, when I saw a bit of it today, because a lot of people were talking about comparing it, saying, Russia has got nukes in space pointing towards America, and what's Tucker doing? He's going around a supermarket in Moscow, and he's a traitor and everything. And the thing there is, it seems to be like a lot of senile boomers who were still stuck in the 80s with America against the Soviet Union.
Yeah, well, and that group is dying off and waking up. I certainly know that I deal with some of them on my day to day, and it's again, it's perception management that's Hollywood is taken care of. And I thought that funny. They're starting a war with Russia again because all the movies are bad. We need a new bad guy, and it's the old bad guy. So we need the Russians to be evil again. But that narrative is crumbling with older people because they see it. It's a financial argument, and that's why I vote or expect there to be war, because it has to be all-out war for it to go on.
I wonder if when we get older, that our generational delusions will be like the Arabs or the Chinese, and future generations will be like, those delusional old senile millennials. You need to get over the yellow terror or something. I don't know.
We will all be computer programs in our old age, and senility will be designed out of our operating system.
Oh no, not me. I'm gonna run away to there's a hut on the marshes not far from here. I'll just run away and live there.
Doing that will be illegal.
What you're saying, we're going to be like a ghost in the shell, like these old, decrepit, haunted AI that warn of impending doom on the dark web.
Yeah, basically.
I love that idea. Can I borrow that for a film?
Yeah,
perhaps we could hash this out one day on the stream.
Yeah,
on the
let's do
stream.
that.
Yeah, I just collect all my digital works, and I live in like a wooden hut on the marshes, and any when I'm old, any young cyberpunk kids that come around, playing, I sort of warn them and say, let me tell you about a world before all this.
I love it.
But perhaps I'll become like Lita the Second from June and just have the consciousness of all the distant right within me as I speak. And one moment I'm AI, the next moment I'm John. Then I'm back to me
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. And you have like local like town folk that say, "Oh, stay away from the marshes and that crazy AI, that old crazy old guy in the marshes."
Well, it's been lovely speaking with you, gentlemen. I think I need to take
Yeah,
my leave.
I think we're going to call it a night as well. It's been a pretty good stream. Thanks guys for coming on, and thanks everyone in for chat. And Iron Duke, hello there. I hope you're feeling better. He hasn't been quite well recently, so it's good to see him in the chat below and promoting. And Rory Herbert as well, as always. He's like,
Well,
Rory Herbert's, yeah.
Sorry,
Sorry,
go.
go ahead. I was going to say Rory Herbert. He's a chap who's been everywhere. He's incredible sort of connections. This guy, and he's in and around our circles and dips in and out. So yeah, it's and Michael as well, and everybody else. So no, thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you Hitman and John and Elizabeth and Nortuga. Sorry I didn't get to say goodbye to Nortuga, but I tried to say hello, but my mic went. So or goodbye even. So yeah, good to have those guys on.
No, it's great to talk to you chaps again. And again, I send my wishes and best endeavours to Iron Duke. He's a tough old soldier.
Yeah, get him. And when he's feeling better, you remember to check out on Saturday 9 o'clock UK time, 9 p.m. UK time. You have Splendid Isolation, which is his show, his stream, and that's usually with Iron Duke, myself, and Mitch, who was on here last time, and Ataman, and other people like that. So yeah, that's a good stream to watch for sure.
And before we finish, there is one thing I would like to show, if that's okay, AI.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, myself and John here next Saturday are going to be having a stream on my channel. We're going to be discussing romanticism and film, so that should be a wonderful conversation.
I'm prepping for it. It will be 2 weeks of I'm brushing off my Wordsworth, just trying to re-establish myself. But yeah, I look really greatly forward to that.
Okay, so Hitman, I just need to ask a question quickly.
Yes.
You're not having any like Blairite era peak wank films like Notting Hill or Love
no.
Actually?
Just to confirm, romanticism. So I mean things like Lawrence of Arabia, or
sorry.
Excalibur,
Sorry.
or even I might. Or now that I've learned that John's also seen the Henry V, maybe that as well, because I think there's definitely some romantic elements.
Romanticism.
And I was thinking of adding Barry Lyndon, in that it's like this meeting of the nihilistic, the nihilistic world meets the romantic period.
I've not actually seen that, but I probably should. So
you absolutely should. It's beautiful.
Apologies, Hitman. What happens is I've got because I'm using a different computer. I'm using a headset, and it's a bit. You said romanticism, I thought you meant romantics in films. So I misheard that. No, I was going to panic a bit there. I thought, oh no, you're going to be subverted by like Blairite crap. No, that'd be
the Hugh Grant film show is what we were going to call it.
Yeah. No, like Lawrence of Arabia, and then that should be good. I'm just trying to think what.
Lord of the Rings as well, because that's definitely some romantic elements in that.
Lord of the Rings. I think. I mean, maybe even like some of the Star Wars prequels, you could probably. I might be drawing it out a bit too much there, but there is. You could. The Captain of Castile. That's one. That's an old one. That's like a 60s one. There's a bit of romanticism in that, I would think.
Not seen that.
I think that's a sort of about Cortez and his conquest of the Aztecs. Sort of like swashbuckling aspect to it.
Well, we'll certainly have plenty to talk about, because there's a lot in romanticism to talk about in the modern era, but also as that philosophy translates into the visual medium of film and storytelling.
No, there is no modern. There's all vengeful lesbians. That's all it ever is. There's the endless vengeful lesbians. And
Well,
bits of
yeah,
feminists.
that in and of itself is a form of romanticism, but like everything, it's been inverted to be perverse. It's not reality.
Indeed.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for joining, guys, and what I would say, good night to everyone listening.
Yep.
Good
everyone.
night.